Okay, so yesterday we put in our new table of contents, Unit 7. Title of our unit is Factoring, page 34, Factoring Out the GCF of a Polynomial. That was on page 33. That was yesterday, which was the 21st, so we should have dated this page 221, just so we know when we started our new unit. And we worked on yesterday factoring out the GCF of a polynomial. Again, we should date that page 221, and it was on page 31. So we talked about how you write the polynomial under the upside down division sign. You find a number that divides evenly into each coefficient and constant, divide by the common factor, and keep dividing by other factors until only the number that divides into each term is 1. Divide by any variables that each term has in common. The GCF is found on the outside of the division sign. Place parentheses around the terms at the bottom of the division sign. Write your answer with the GCF outside the parentheses. So we started working through these. Okay, so we did example 1, we did example 2, we started example 3. I need you today to complete example 3, pull out what our greatest common factor is, so what they all have in common, and then don't forget to finish by writing it in this form. I also need you to complete example number 4. Again, pull out what they all have in common, make it numerically, and there should be a variable component to that. Alright? And then make sure that you complete it in this form here with our GCF on the outside and what's left over inside the parentheses. Okay, so new information for today is going to go on page 35. Okay, today's date is 2/22. Alright, we're going to look at parts of a polynomial. So our title is Parts of a Polynomial. Before we get started, we're then going to add it to our table of contents. So we're on page 35. Parts of a polynomial. Okay, so we added that on, and now we're on page 35. Before we can actually put anything on this page, we need to take our foldable, which is this one right here, and we need to fold it. So the first thing you're going to do is flip it over, fold it in half lengthwise. Okay, and try to be as neat as possible with that. Okay, I'm going to move our notebook out of the way. So here is our foldable now. Okay, this will be the back end of our foldable. So what we need to do is we're going to fold it in half again, like so. There we go. So now it looks like this. So you have terms and coefficients on this side, parts of a polynomial, and then open on this side. Fold it one more time. Okay, so now we have parts of a polynomial and nothing. Okay, so that when we open it, it opens here. Then we open it one more time and it does this. Okay? Alright. So before we glue it in, we're going to make a couple of notes to this and do some things to it. Alright, so parts of a polynomial. Okay. So there are multiple parts of a polynomial. We have terms. The parts of the polynomial that are being added or subtracted are terms. So they're separated by an addition or subtraction sign. We underline each of them. So go ahead, take your pencil, take your pen, whatever you're writing with today, and go ahead and underline, where it says underline each of them. Go ahead and zoom in a little. Okay, hopefully that's better. Okay, and then how many terms are in the polynomial? So that's a question we need to ask ourselves. Okay. So then we have coefficients. If a term has a variable, the number in front of the variable is the coefficient. Highlight each coefficient. Each coefficient takes the sign in front of it. If the coefficient is not written, it is an invisible 1. So again, you need a highlighter or some sort of marker. You know where they are. So you take whatever you have, okay, and you highlight each of the coefficients. So we're going to highlight all the coefficients that we see in our examples. Okay? So we underlined, we highlighted. Okay, then we're opening up. Constants. If a term has no variable, it is a constant. The constant takes the sign in front of it. Circle the constant if it exists. Okay. So we're going to make sure that we circle constants if they exist. Okay. Leading term. The term with the highest exponent is known as the leading term. Label the leading term. Highest exponent, ladies and gentlemen. Now, yesterday we talked about the smallest exponent of being our greatest common factor, but the leading term is the highest exponent. Okay? The leading coefficient is the coefficient of the leading term. It is known as the leading coefficient. Okay? So the coefficient of this term is our leading coefficient. And then the last thing, degree. If your polynomial only has one variable, the degree of the polynomial is the exponent of the leading term. Label the degree of the polynomial. So we're going to do all of these things. We're going to label everything that we need from our foldable on our examples. Before we do our examples, we're going to take our foldable right here, and we're going to glue it in. Alright, so here's our page 35. Fold it back up. Go to the back side with nothing on it. Take our glue stick. Okay, you don't need a lot of glue. And we're going to glue it into the upper left-hand corner. Okay, so that when we unfold it, it folds this way out of our notebook. Alright? Alright. Now we have that glued in. Time for some examples, alright? So, our first example. Example number 1. Okay. We are looking at the polynomial negative 5x plus 3x squared minus 12 plus 1x cubed. Okay. Now the first thing I want us to do, is because we need to get used to doing it and keep being used to doing it, is to write this in standard form. Okay. So if we remember, standard form starts with the highest exponent and then you work your way down. So we're going to start with this x plus 3. So it's positive. So we get x to the third. Okay, so that's our first term, because it's the 3. Our second term is going to be the 2, because that would come next if we were counting. Okay, so we got 3, 2, now 1, and that's negative. And then 0, so there's no variable here, so that's minus 12. So this is standard form. Okay, now we're going to start to identify. So what do I want to identify first? I want to identify all the terms first. So I'm going to underline all my terms. Okay, so anything separated by either an addition or subtraction symbol. So this is the term, this is the term, term, and term. Okay. Okay. So count how many terms we have. 1, 2, 3, 4. This has 4 terms. Okay. Then we said, coefficients, to identify coefficients, which are which is a variable that has a term or has a number in front, we highlight. So we're going to highlight those. Okay. So let's start easy. Okay, well this x squared has a 3 in front of it, so that's a coefficient. This x has a negative 5 in front of it, that's a coefficient. What should be in front of this x cubed? It's going to be a 1. So your coefficient for x cubed is 1. Okay? Remember we said that if it's not written, it's an invisible 1. So there's an invisible 1 here. Okay, so now we're going to identify our constant. Okay, we're going in order. So we're identifying our constant. It's the number without a variable. So the only number that we have without a variable in this case is this negative 12. We take our sign with us. Okay, so we're going to circle that whole thing. It's negative 12. That's our constant. Okay. Next, we're going to identify what our leading term is. So the leading term is the one with the highest exponent. Now, since we put it in standard form, it's going to be really easy. It's going to be our first term in our standard form. So if we're looking here, our first term is this 1x cubed. So that's going to be our leading term. So let me just say leading term. Okay, and our leading term is going to be a positive 1x cubed. And we just like to keep the sign with us just so we know that it is positive. Alright, so going in order, leading coefficient. What is our leading coefficient? Well, the leading coefficient should be the coefficient of our leading term. In this case, our coefficient is going to be 1. So we have our leading coefficient. Okay, and that is just 1. Okay. And then last, we need to identify the degree. So the degree is the highest leading exponent, so it's the exponent of your leading term. So the degree of this polynomial is going to be 3. So this polynomial, for example, 1 has 4 terms, has a leading term of 1x cubed, has a leading coefficient of 1, a degree of 3, has a constant of negative 12, and has coefficients of 1, 3, and negative 5. Alright? Now this is pretty easy. You're going to do 2 examples on your own on the same page. Example or practice problem number 2, however you want to write it, is 15x to the 4th minus 10x squared minus 2 plus 1 x to the 5th minus 4x to the 6th. Okay, so I want you to rewrite this in standard form. Identify all the things that are asked to be identified inside your little foldable. Okay. I also want you to do it with this problem also. Okay, so that's the last practice problem for this. Okay. Alright, so you're going to wrap this up. When everybody's done with this, your sub is going to play the next video for you, and then you'll work out your worksheet. Thank you.